Hello, and welcome to this webinar on peer review, held as part of this year's Peer Review Week and brought to you by Edance Group, provider of expert English services, training and publishing support for researchers, and we're at edanceediting.com. I'm Dr. Trevor Lane, Education Director and Senior Publishing Consultant at Edance Group and Edance Editing China, Liwen Bianji. Today's webinar will look at these 5 topics: the main aims and models of peer review, best practices in peer review, efficiently reading a research paper, parts of a research paper, and then some common problems in research papers that I've noticed over 20 years of working with authors, editors, and journals. Now, what is peer review? Deborah Poff from COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, and I'm a council member of COPE. She says it's a process where peer experts in a particular field of knowledge creation, from scientific research to creative arts production, are invited and accept to review and provide learned and critical evaluation of the scholarly merit of the researcher's or creator's intellectual product. So that's quite a good, concise definition. It covers both arts and sciences. So what is it for? Well, it's for deciding what goes into scholarly journals and scholarly books and book chapters, for funding applications, conference presentations, for universities to decide about hiring, tenure, and promotion, and for societies to decide about accreditation and membership, and for deciding who to give prizes and awards to. In this webinar, we will look at scholarly journals. So who are the peer reviewers? Now, the peer review process at journals involves the journal staff as well as external peer reviewers. These are experts in the same field. They've done similar research and they've made a contribution to the field, and they know the current literature, that's important, as well as the current techniques and methods. And they have time, they have language skills because peer review for international journals uses English, and they have good reviewing skills. And generally, good reviewers are early to mid-career researchers. They have a research qualification and they've already published something, but they're not from the same department or research group as the author, and they shouldn't be a recent collaborator. Now, here's a quick overview of the journal peer review process. The author submits a paper to the editor, and then there's something called desk review. There's a check of basic things such as, is the topic in the scope of the journal? Is the design relevant? Is the work ethical and legal? And is it original, meaning it's not copied or plagiarized from an already published paper? Are the results meaningful? Is the English clear enough to at least read the scientific content? And is it the proper length and format? Now, sometimes if authors are lucky and the editor sees that the science is good but cannot really read the English, they might give a second chance for the authors to have the work professionally edited and then resubmitted. Otherwise, if the English is too bad or there's a bigger flaw in the paper, it goes to desk rejection. If it passes this desk review stage, your paper will be sent to 1 or 2, usually 2 peer reviewers, and they are usually given 3 or 4 weeks, and they return the comments back to the editor, who can decide either outright rejection or acceptance, but that type of acceptance is rare. Usually they'll ask the author to revise, and they'll ask them to revise for these types of things: new experiments, clarifying information, clarifying the text or presentation. Within the deadline, the author returns the paper to the editor, who can then make the final decision. Sometimes it goes back to the peer reviewers. Now, what types of journal decision are there? There's the rare one, which is accept as is. If there's revisions, this will be conditional acceptance, and the journal office or the chief editor will make the final decision. Or there's a revise and resubmit. This needs major revisions. and the paper is usually sent back to the original peer reviewers or maybe a new reviewer. That's why peer review does take time. Now, there's also rejection, and some journals add wording to make it clear that you are invited to resubmit if you make major revisions, or the wording may just be a hint. So it's good to get a native English-speaking colleague to interpret the rejection letter. Sometimes there is a chance to resubmit. Or you might decide to appeal if you think the reviewers have actually made a mistake. Now, the aims of peer review are to select what goes into scholarly journals. Now, some journals use this aspect as the main selection criteria, as well as scientific quality, but they do look at the journalism aspect, whether they think subjectively that the work has potential importance and potential impact in the world, and that the work will become world headlines the next day. They also look at the scientific quality. Some journals only look at number 2, but not number 1. And so they will stress the technical quality, the study design, the reporting quality, and ethics and integrity. So let's have a look at study quality and reporting quality. So peer reviewers should be looking for a relevant research question, good design, good methods, and enough detail for other people to repeat the work, and good data analysis with valid conclusions. They also look at the quality of the manuscript and whether it's logical, the 4 C's, complete, correct, clear, and concise, and whether the work is interesting, has readability, correct tone, technicality for the type of audience, and also the article type in the journal. So do read the journal guidelines. And this might seem minor, but journals don't like it if you structure your paper wrong or format it in the wrong way, including, for example, the reference style. Now, the aim of peer review, of course, is to be fair and efficient and to have high-quality peer review reports and to improve the quality of the work that the journal publishes. And that helps with the quality of the scientific research archive. So there's different ways to do this. So different journals have slightly different variations. There's one version called pre-publication peer review. That's where you submit a paper and it undergoes traditional peer review and revision before acceptance and publication. There's also post-publication peer review, where a paper will undergo an initial screening and then will be accepted for publication. Then it undergoes peer review and finally an approval step and then indexing. There's a relatively newer type called pre-submission or portable peer review, where the peer review is organized by the authors, often through a third party, and then submitted to a journal. The journal might decide to do an extra journal peer review step, and then that leads to acceptance and publication. Another variation is on who knows who is reviewing the paper. So single blind is where the reviewer can see who the author is, but the reviewer report is not signed, so the author doesn't know who the reviewer is. Double blind is where author and reviewer don't know who each other are. And triple blind is when the editor who makes the final decision doesn't know who the authors or reviewers are. So some people think this leads to more objective and unbiased reviewing. There's a newer type called open, or more accurately open identity, where the author and reviewer knows each other, who each other is during the peer review process. And an opened is where the reviewer wasn't known, but the name is shown after acceptance, so the public knows. There's another type called transparent or content open or open report review, where the actual peer review report is also published alongside the paper, with or without the reviewer names, depending on their permission or the journal policy. Now, some journals give the author the choice of the model, whether it's single blind, double blind, or open. And some journals give the reviewers the choice to sign the reports, even though it's single blind or double blind. They don't mind that the authors see who the reviewer is, or the other reviewers if the journal shares review reports among the reviewers. The public will see the name, and if they opt for that choice, and if the paper is rejected by the first choice journal and the author has an option to pass it to another journal, then sometimes the peer review reports and the name can be passed along to the other journal. Now, how do peer reviewers get selected? The journal could select from external peer reviewers from its own lists or from public databases or even from the reference list from the author's paper. And this may include choices from the author. Maybe they've suggested a reviewer who should be objective and not related to that author, or they might sometimes exclude reviewers. So some journals also look at these. The journal may select from a list of reviewers from an approved review board, or a platform where people upload their articles might have members from in a community, and they will peer review each other's papers as long as they don't have any relationship with the author or the research. So they self-select and they look at what they want to review. Or the final one, which is completely public and also sometimes called open review, and the readers will leave comments on the paper. This could be preprints, postprints, or the final article, the post-publication article. Now, preprints are unpublished and not peer-reviewed. They haven't been submitted to a journal yet, but some journals allow authors to upload those to get public comments. Postprints are the accepted version, but it's not the final version of the paper. And again, some journals allow authors to upload these to a repository for sharing, usually among researchers. Now, the chief editor makes the final decision, but sometimes if the reviewers have conflicting advice, the editor might send the paper to another person, a third person. So sometimes this is referred to as a tiebreaker system, and you'll hear the word referee rather than reviewer sometimes. In some journals, they make a group decision among reviewers, or they might have a committee of editorial staff who make the final decision. So sometimes this is called a hanging committee. Now, the sequence in peer review can also vary. The traditional peer review is where an author can submit a paper only to one journal at a time, and that gets reviewed by independent reviewers. A newer type is transferable or cascading, or sometimes called portable review, where the first choice journal, if it rejects your paper, it will give you the choice of passing the manuscript with or without the peer review report to another journal in the publishing group or in the family of journals. Another type of portable review is where the author submits a rejected manuscript with the reviews to another journal. And collaborative review is where the reviewers will collaborate to just produce one review report, or in some cases, the reviewers and authors are allowed to engage with each other. There's also cross-referee commenting or cross-review, where the reviewers can comment on each other's review reports. And another definition of cross-review is where reviewers and editors can comment on each other's reports. And some journals just give a copy of the other referees or reviewers' reports to the other person, so all the reviewers know how the other reviewers commented on the paper. For example, when you get a paper back that's been revised, you need to know why the author has made those revisions, so you can see what the other reviewer said. Or some journals, out of courtesy, give the review reports to all the reviewers after the final decision has been made, whether it's accept or reject.